And the gut is where nutrients are absorbed. And if you have a leaky gut, for example, you're not absorbing protein sufficiently, even if you have a high protein intake. You're doing protein wrong. The shocking truth about gut health. That's something I'm going to talk about today, so stick around. Hi, my name is Hachiaki Takamiya, a 62-year-old biohacker based on Japanese natural health and the author of Live Wiser, Not Smarter. Okay, let's talk about protein, which is a controversial topic, and it is a confusing topic because views are so divided. But today, I'll introduce a new perspective on protein. First of all, I'd like to ask you a question. How much protein do you take per day? So we have different views on protein intake. Now, RDA recommended daily allowance says 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. That has been the norm for many years. But recently, many experts are saying this is not sufficient. For most people, you need about 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Or if you're older individuals, like people over 60, or if you're physically active, you might need more, such as 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. And some experts, like Dr. Peter Attia, says that you might need up to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, which is a gram per a pound of body weight. So how about you? How much protein do you take per day? Please write your situation in the comment section below. And where do you source your protein? Do you source your protein from plant or from animals? What are the ratio of plant sources and animal sources? Please write that in the comment section below too. Thank you. Now, if you're sourcing your protein from 100% from plant sources, you may be doing protein wrong. I mean, I wouldn't say wrong, and especially if you are doing it for religious reason or spiritual reason or environmental reason, I understand that perfectly. But if you think it from purely nutritional perspective, it may not be optimal or it may be very difficult to meet your protein requirement. And on the other hand, if you're sourcing your protein mostly from animal sources, maybe you're doing protein wrong too. And I don't blame both of you because, in a way, you are kind of led to take your stances because now the views are completely divided between the plant camp and animal camp. And both views are kind of biased because there are industrial influences. For the animal side, obviously the meat industry, but also the protein powder, which is a huge industry now. Many people are taking protein powder. And then many experts who are in the animal camp say we need a high amount of protein. They support the kind of higher protein intake. And then that means you'd have to rely upon protein powder. Because let's say if you need 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, it becomes kind of difficult to meet your requirement only from whole food. You'd have to have 5 meals a day or something, just like many athletes do. If you have only 3 meals a day, it will be quite difficult without a protein powder. And if you practice intermittent fasting, where you have only 2 meals a day, it's almost impossible. So this high protein diet is based on protein powder, including diet. And for the plant side, you have this plant-based meat industry, which is a huge growing industry at the moment. I'm not saying those experts themselves are biased, but there are these influences from the industry. So that's something we need to take into consideration. And the problem is we are led to choose between the two options, either the plant or the animal, but we should have more options. So today, I'd like to share with you the third option. Now, so this is the endoscope channel, which is a Japanese YouTube channel, which is very popular now with 251K subscribers. And this is run by Dr. Tetsuro Hirashima and Dr. Motohisa Akiyama. I shared with you about this channel before too. And they are endoscope doctors, but they are specializing in gut health too. However, they support high protein diet. Usually, doctors who support the kind of gut health don't usually talk about protein so much, but they do. They emphasize protein a lot. Yet, they are not recommending high animal diet either. What they are recommending is both plant and animal. So ideal ratio of plant and animal is 1 to 1. So 50% of your protein sources should come from plant and 50% of your protein sources should come from animal. So that's a kind of a unique perspective that we don't hear so much in the West. So that is what I'm sharing with you today. So first, I'll share with you why the 1 to 1 ratio is critical for protein absorption, and then gut health and protein absorption, and then how to have both a protein rich and gut friendly diet, and then what role fish plays as an animal protein source, and finally, breakfast that those two doctors recommend, because quite often breakfast is the key in protein intake. Many experts agree that you need to absorb protein in the morning because during your sleep you have absence from food, therefore the body require nutrient in the morning, including protein. So therefore the type of breakfast you have influences your daily protein intake. So what kind of breakfast is ideal according to those two doctors? So if you're interested in all this, please watch the video until the end. Now, those of you who just discovered this video today, this is the Ikigai diet channel, which is the health and longevity channel. We usually cover things like diet, exercise, mindset, and sometimes we cover Japanese blue zones because there are several blue zones in Japan other than Okinawa, and we cover from traditional Japanese health method to modern Japanese health trends such as chokatsu. So basically, this is a channel about how to increase health span for people over 50 or 60. So if you're interested, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you. So the Endoscope channel, now they recently published a book called タンパク質と腸の新常識, which means new common sense about protein and the gut. They regard protein to be the most important one among the three major nutrients. The three major nutrients are protein, carbs, and fat. And they think protein deficiency is the cause of aging, obesity, and many kinds of diseases. That is why they recommend high protein diet. And they think about 1 gram to 1.5 gram per kilogram body weight is beneficial for many people, and for some people, up to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. But 50% can come from plant-based sources and 50% from animal-based sources. Now, So animal camp experts usually say animal sources have a better protein quality based on DIAAS, which is digestible, indispensable amino acid score. Basically, animal sources are often considered complete proteins because they typically contain high amounts of all nine essential amino acids in proportions that readily meet human needs. But plant sources can sometimes be incomplete proteins because they may have lower amounts of one or more of the essential amino acid. But according to those two doctors, DIAAS doesn't show the effect on gut health. And the gut is where nutrients are absorbed. And if you have a leaky gut, for example, you're not absorbing protein sufficiently, even if you have a high protein intake. In fact, they see many patients and they often discover that even the patient have a high protein intake, they don't have enough protein in their system because they have a leaky gut. Therefore, the intake of protein should be considered in conjunction with gut health. There's no point of having a high protein diet if you're not absorbing protein efficiently into your system. And if the majority of your protein comes from animal sources, especially meat and dairy, you may not be optimizing your gut health. Now, when you talk about gut health, we need to think about gut microbiome, and there are three different types of bacteria: good bacteria, bad bacteria, and opportunistic bacteria. And the ideal ratio is 2 for good bacteria, 1 for bad bacteria, and 7 for opportunistic bacteria. And how do the bad bacteria get increased? Through certain food, and one of them is animal-based protein and fat. It can increase bad bacteria. It doesn't mean you shouldn't eat meat because you can have a certain amount of bad bacteria. Bad bacteria doesn't mean it is all bad. The question is the amount. If you have excess amount of animal-based protein and fat, it can cause problem. And dairy too. Dairy contain casein that can cause a leaky gut. How about good bacteria? How do they get increased? Through fiber. If you consume a lot of fiber, you can feed beneficial bacteria in your gut. And all plant protein sources contain fiber. Even though their amino acid score isn't high, they have this benefit. Their protein quality isn't necessarily lower if you consider the protein absorption. In fact, the term protein quality is misleading. This is a typical Western way of thinking that you want to label one is being superior, other being inferior, or one is more optimal, and so on. There are no superior or inferior protein sources. They are just different. And because of that, because of the differences, they can compensate one another. If you have a half of your protein intake from plant sources and half from animal sources, they can compensate one another. Now, I talked about this breakfast, steaks and eggs, because Elon Musk said he switched to this type of breakfast recently to Joe Rogan. And I think Joe Rogan have this kind of breakfast as well. Now, this is a good breakfast in terms of protein intake. It's a high protein breakfast and it has a high amino acid profile too. But it doesn't support the gut health because there's no fiber. So better to maybe have eggs and some other plant protein sources, or you can just have a salad or something to compensate. You definitely need some kind of fiber for your breakfast to support your gut health. Now, plant protein sources are efficient that you can get both protein and fiber. So you can have egg, steaks, and salad too. But more food you have, then the higher calorie you get. So the efficient way is to include some plant protein sources. This way, you can get both protein and fiber at the same time. And by combining different plant protein sources, they can compensate one another too with their amino acid profile. I said some of the plant sources are incomplete proteins, but by combining different kind of plant, you can meet the required amount of amino acid. For example, let's look at the Magoa Yasashi Koku. This is very helpful in so many ways, even for the protein intake too, because we have a beans, nuts and seeds, and whole grains. They are different plant protein sources, but they have different amino acid profile. So if beans lack in certain amino acid, nuts and seeds can cover it, or a whole grain can cover it. So if you make sure you have a plenty of beans, nuts and seeds, and whole grains in your diet, you should have sufficient amount of all 9 essential amino acid. Having said that, it is actually difficult to calculate all this to make sure you have enough beans, nuts and seeds, and whole grain. And that is why I said it is difficult to meet your protein requirement just sourcing 100% of your protein from plant sources only. I mean, it's possible, but it requires a careful calculation, and that is not practical for many people. So if you try to force yourself to stick to plant, quite often you end up being deficient in protein intake. However, the great things about Magoa Yasashi Koku is we also have fish, and fish makes a huge difference. So one food that is not plant-based, but because of that, it has the advantage of animal-based sources of having a higher protein content and having all 9 essential amino acid in high number. But it is also good for your gut because fish, especially fatty fish, contains a high amount of omega-3 fatty acid, which can help increase good bacteria in your gut. And fish contains high amount of vitamin D that reinforces the connection between the cells of the intestinal lining. So it can prevent a leaky gut. So fish is unique in that sense as an animal source. It is different from meat and dairy. In fact, I think the ideal ratio is something like this. So plant for 2 and meat for 1 and fish for 1. Or you can have 1, 1, 1. That is also fine too. But you want to include fish on your plate. It makes a lot of difference if you include fish. So the thing is, in the West, argument is often, plant versus meat and dairy. I understand that because fish is not a big part of your diet, but fish is the alternative. Fish have the benefit of both plant and animal sources. So by including fish and a little bit of meat and then plant, you can have a good balance of mixture. And also eggs. Eggs is another critical source. In fact, Dr. Akiyama regards eggs highly. Dr. Motohisa Akiyama, he regards eggs highly because eggs are complete nutritional food. Only thing egg doesn't have is vitamin C and fiber. So this breakfast, steak and eggs, is not too bad from Dr. Akiyama's point of view because it has the eggs. But he wouldn't recommend this kind of breakfast. So do you want to know what kind of breakfast he recommends? And Dr. Hirashima too. sometimes I forget who recommended what. I mean, I think Dr. Akiyama mostly, but book was co-authored by two of them. So yeah, Dr. Hiroshima recommend this breakfast as well. So what is the ideal breakfast for your protein intake and gut health? Possible eggs, and second, broccoli, because eggs don't have vitamin C, but broccoli is high in vitamin C. Also, broccoli has fiber and it has sulforaphane, which can activate autophagy. And then you can have natto, which is a high protein ingredient. It is one of the highest among the plant sources. And natto has fiber, which becomes a prebiotic to feed the beneficial bacteria in your gut, and probiotic, which is a natto bacteria that can also support the gut microbiome. Now, natto bacteria in many ways the key for your gut health. I won't talk about it in detail today because it's going to take a long time, but that makes a big difference. For details, please read my book. But anyway, so you should have eggs, broccoli, and natto in your breakfast. For example, you can have 2 fried eggs, and then a miso soup with broccoli, and then wakame and tofu, and you can have natto and rice, but cold rice, not hot rice, because when the rice is cooled down, it turns to resistant starch, which can also become food for beneficial gut bacteria. Or instead, you can have natto tamago kake gohan, which means you put natto and raw egg on top of rice. That is also okay. And you can add salmon if you like, or you can have a little pickles and nori. Those are all common ingredients in Japanese breakfast. By the way, this is their recommendation, not necessarily my recommendation. The kind of breakfast that I recommend, I'll talk about it in some other videos. And in my case, if I were to source those ingredients, such as eggs or fish, I would source free range eggs, and for fish, small fish or wild caught fish. Choose fish that is healthy, that is kind of safe. So that is critical, even for the meat too. Source organic meat, and that is important. Dr. Hiroshima and Dr. Akiyama don't talk about the types of eggs, meat, and fish. Usually, that is the case for many Japanese doctors. They don't usually talk about the type of the ingredients so much. So that is the difference between me and other Japanese experts. To understand it fully, please read Live Wiser, Not Smarter. So about this natto bacteria, why natto bacteria is unique to increase your beneficial gut bacteria, and also about the protein, how much protein you need per day, and so on. Please read Chapter 3, The Ideal Diet to Increase Health Span, and Chapter 4, The Ideal Fasting to Increase Health Span. In fact, I want you to read the entire book because the book covers everything from diet, fasting, exercise, heat and cold exposure, sleep, and brain optimization. You need to have a holistic understanding of how body works before determining what kind of breakfast you should have or how much protein you should take and so on, because everything is related to other area. For example, exercise. When you talk about protein intake, you need to understand about exercise, what kind of exercise you can do with your protein intake, and what timing you should have protein with your exercise, and so on. If you have only one area, or if you look at only one area, such as just a protein or amino acid, you miss other points, such as gut health in today's case. But the same thing is true about other things. Without understanding exercise and fasting and other things, you will miss other things too. So first, have a holistic understanding of your health, then you can optimize every aspect of your health. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Again, my name is Hachiaki Takamiya, the author of Live Wiser, Not Smarter. If you like this video, please give me your thumb up and subscribe to my channel. And please leave your comment. What kind of breakfast do you have to optimize your protein intake and gut health? Now, so Dr. Hirashima and Dr. Akiyama also talk about other nutrients that can support your protein absorption. So to understand the protein, you need to think of other nutrients too. So that's something I'll talk about in the next video. And I also made a video about Dr. Hirashima and Akiyama, their view on breakfast. If you want to know that, please watch this video.